see how many North Vietnamese soldiers were killed and how many civilians were killed in that conflict. Okay, it's amazing. So, this is what I always say. Who takes it the worst in a war? Civilians. You know how many South Korean civilians were killed in this conflict? 1 million. 1 million, folks. So we're looking at 2.5 million North Korean soldiers and South Korean civilians, plus 500,000 soldiers on the good side. How many is it? What's that add to?
3 million.
3 million people killed. Do we even fathom that? 3 million people killed in a war that ended up exactly where it was when we started. Am I right?
It's like 1 million people a year.
It's crazy, 1 million a year. And so it just makes, I think people accepted the Korean War, folks. They accepted that. But when Vietnam came and we were trying to do the same thing, keep the North Vietnamese from taking over the South Vietnamese, what came through people's minds?
What?
Korea. And as the war ended in Korea and the Vietnam War started and it went a little bit longer, and American lives started being lost, people started to protest, something we had never, ever, ever done in our nation's history military. And that's going to open up a whole new can of worms we'll get to later. It's a great story. Okay? All right. What we'll end up with today is a profile on Dwight D. Eisenhower. I'd like you to know a little bit about the man. Profile on Dwight D. Eisenhower. Not a lot of people know much about him. Profile on Dwight D. Eisenhower. Okay? All right. Dwight David Eisenhower was born, ironically, on October 14th, which is coming up here pretty quick, 1890. He was born on October 14th, 1890. Would that not make him 118 years old on his birthday this year? I think that's right. Okay? And he was born in Denison, Texas. D-E-N-I-S-O-N. D-E-N-I-S-O-N. So, Dwight David Eisenhower was born on October 14th, 1890 in Denison, Texas. His parents were David and Ida, I-D-A, Eisenhower. They were both deeply religious people. Dwight's parents were David and Ida, I-D-A, Eisenhower. Both were deeply religious people. And the Eisenhowers, David and Ida, had 6 children. All boys. All boys. So Eisenhower was born on October 14th, 1890 in Denison, Texas. His parents, David and Ida Eisenhower, were deeply religious people, and the family had 6 children, all boys. The Cottrells in reverse. Not quite 6, but right. Dwight was in the middle of the family. He had 2 older brothers and 3 younger brothers. He was kind of right in the middle. He had 2 older brothers and 3 younger brothers. He was in the middle of the family, having 2 older brothers and 3 younger brothers. When he was just 2, the family moved to Abilene, Kansas. They moved to Abilene, Kansas when he was 2. Moved to Abilene, Kansas. Well, those 6 boys worked. They helped raise and sell vegetables, along with finding a variety of other jobs to contribute to household expenses. You guys don't even get that. We don't do that now. Kids don't go to work and give the money they earn to their parents to help run the household. That's what had to happen in the 40s and 50s. And so these 6 Eisenhower boys, they went and got jobs and sold vegetables, not for their spending money necessarily, but to help the family survive. We just don't even get that. Kids don't do that these days. So the 6 boys helped raise and sell vegetables, sold those, found a variety of other odd jobs to contribute to the household expenses. That's what they did. Now, Dwight was very popular with his classmates in school, and they gave him the nickname Little Ike. Little Ike. How come he got that name, Joe? Little Ike. Well, that's a good guess, but wouldn't you want to be Big Ike? Who wants to be Little Ike? Why wasn't he Big Ike?
So it already was big.
What? Say it. Say it again. What did you say? I think you said it.
There already was a big guy.
There already was a Big Ike. Who was the Big Ike? His older brother Edgar.
Um,
So they distinguished the two, as one was Big Ike, that was Edgar, and he was Little Ike. So they got him, didn't get him confused. So Dwight was very popular with his classmates. They gave him the nickname Little Ike. That was to distinguish him from his older brother Edgar,
Why?
known as Big Ike. What?
Was it Ike? Is it like just trying to...
Ike Eisenhower.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just kind of a short for Eisenhower. Well, do you guys still do this in yearbooks as a project to what you're going to be? When I was going to school, they'd say, you know, Andrew at home will turn out to be a world famous weightlifter and win the Mr. Universe contest.
It's kind of like the most likely to be president.
Or something like that, yeah. Well, anyway, when Dwight got his high school yearbook, they projected him that he was going to become a history professor. That's what they used to do in the old days. Even when I was going to school in the mid-70s, they'd predict what. I'll have to bring my old high school annual and read to you what they predicted I would be, and you tell me if you think it's very close. I'll bring it tomorrow. We'll read that, shall we? They call it class prophecy and class prediction or something. I'll bring that tomorrow, and we'll see what they predicted me to be back in 1976.
You don't remember?
I do, but I want to read it so you get a full shot of it, okay? You see if you think it's true. Well, guess what they predicted his older brother Edgar to become?
The president?
President of the United States, ironically. So he was projected, so to speak, by his high school yearbook to be a history professor. The one that was going to be President of the United States, according to the yearbook, was his older brother Edgar. Now, this is something you can't even fathom. After he graduated from high school, Dwight got a full-time job. You know what he did with the money? What? No, he paid Edgar's first-year college expenses. Helped him pay his expenses to college. That's what you did in those days. So Edgar evidently wasn't he kind of the one that was predicted, probably not only by his yearbook, but maybe by people in general, to be the most successful one? So after he graduated from high school, Dwight worked full-time to help with Edgar's first-year college expenses. I can't imagine Emily Baumstark getting a job in the summer and giving most of her money to Cody so he can go to Sheridan.
Emily wouldn't do that for anybody.
Huh? Peyton's working, give Hannah money. Kyra's working to give Callie money. Well, there you go. Gabe's working, give Soraya money. Ed Holmes working to give your brother, what's his? Palmer money, because that was a long time ago. Can you imagine all that? Old Joe's out there kicking butt at the Sunshine Office Supply so he can send Emily a bunch of money for college. My point being, you don't even fathom that. And poor old Caitlin would really have to send money for her sisters. That's what you did, though. You guys can't even fathom that's what they did. Am I right? You would have done the same thing after your brother gets back from mission. You'd be working and handing this money. Can you even imagine that? That's what he did. Well, here's a good one. Since Dwight couldn't afford to go to college himself because he's earning money for his older brother, was what you did, he decides he's going to apply to the military academies. Because if you can get into a military academy, they pay for your school in exchange for military service, right? So he can't afford to go to college, so he says, you know what I think I'll do? I'll apply to these military academies. Well, Andy Denise is going to find this out. You're going to have some help in this deal. When you apply for an academy, it's not always what you know, but who you know. So he's going to have to find somebody to write him a letter of recommendation. Actually, he already has had that happen. A good friend of mine is a former 4-star general in the Air Force, one of the most highly decorated generals ever in the Air Force, and he wrote Andy a letter of recommendation to get into the Air Force. So that'll weigh heavily during that particular time. Well, Dwight Eisenhower went to his local senator, a guy by the name of Joseph Brostow of Kansas. Remember, he lives in Abilene. So Dwight Eisenhower goes to his local senator, Senator Joseph Brostow of Kansas, and asks him to speak in his behalf to see if he can get into West Point. That's the one he's trying to get into. So Eisenhower makes contact with Senator Joseph Brostow of Kansas, and Joseph Brostow speaks in behalf of Dwight, and Dwight Eisenhower earns an acceptance to West Point. Yes?
Any other military academy besides West Point? 'Cause that seems where.
It's just the
It's
best.
it's the best.
That's the Army. Navy, Air Force, yeah, it's not that, you know, that's the Army, and that's the one that probably gets the most notoriety, I suppose. Well, Eisenhower actually played on the football team at West Point until a knee injury ended his career. He played on the football team at West Point. I just love watching Army play football, even today. And those guys aren't the most talented team because they go there for a purpose. They don't recruit athletes necessary to Army, although they kind of do. But these are guys that have to go there and then commit to military service. So if they're good enough to play in the pros, they can't even go do that because they're serving their time. Roger Staubach of the Dallas Cowboys, who went to the Naval Academy, is probably the best example of that. We'll watch a video on him sometime. It's really a good one. But the point is that this guy played on the West Point football team until a knee injury ended his career. Well, he graduated from West Point in 1915, 1915, and he ranked 61st out of a class of 164. Ranked 61st in a class of 164. Which takes me to another thought of class rank. You know, if you have a very bright class and you're 45th out of 100, that's class rank is so bad. I don't even know why they ask for it, because you can't predict. My son went to high school, and he was, he only had 10 in his class, a small school. He ranked 6 out of 10. Does that look very good? But he had a 3.8 GPA, and all the other kids, I mean, the class rank is deceiving. So he ranked 61st in a class of 164. Well, what do you do when you leave the military academy? Do you leave as a private first class? No, you leave as an officer. That's the idea. And so when Dwight Eisenhower left the military academy at West Point, he had the rank of 2nd lieutenant. 2nd lieutenant. That's the purpose of going, is you go in and get officer training, and you come out an officer. That's why it's so competitive. So he comes out as a 2nd lieutenant.
Is that good?
It's a pretty good rank, yeah. On July 1st of 1916, he marries the former Mamie Dowd, and the couple eventually have 2 sons. I'll tell you, the boys run in the Eisenhower family. So on July 1st of 1916, Dwight marries the former Mamie Dowd, and the couple eventually will have 2 sons. The first son, his name was Dowd David Eisenhower, D-O-U-D, Dowd David Eisenhower, and unfortunately he died of scarlet fever at the age of 3. So they lost their firstborn. Dowd, D-O-U-D, named after mom's last name, Dowd David Eisenhower, dies of scarlet fever at the age of 3. So that was a little bit of a tragedy in the Eisenhower family for sure. The second son, John Sheldon Eisenhower, becomes an Army officer, and that son of a gun is lucky enough, Peyton, to get married in the White House. He gets married in the White House. Who's he married? What president's daughter? Ironically.
Truman? Kennedy.
Who's it like?
Nixon.
Richard Nixon's daughter. Very good. So John Sheldon Eisenhower becomes an Army officer, and he would eventually marry Julie Nixon, President Nixon's daughter, in a ceremony at the White House. Those were the 2 children of Dwight and Mamie Eisenhower. Dowd David, who died of scarlet fever at the age of 3, and John Sheldon Eisenhower, who became an Army officer and eventually married Julie Nixon, President Nixon's daughter, in the White House. Well, we'll talk about, briefly, I'm going to give you 7 steps of Eisenhower's military career from 1916 until 1948. I'm just going to give you a short chronological order of Eisenhower's military career from 1916 to 1948. So that 32-year career, this is kind of where these are the most 7 important events in chronological order. Well, in 1933, he serves as an aide to General Douglas MacArthur. He becomes General MacArthur's top aide in 1933. So in 1933, Eisenhower becomes the top aide to General Douglas MacArthur. Number 2, just prior to the start of World War II, he was given command of the 3rd Army, which was kind of a big deal to get that command. So just prior to the start of World War II, Eisenhower was given command of the 3rd Army, which was one of the more powerful regiments in the United States Army, the 3rd Army. Number 3, in March of 1942, he was promoted to Major General. In March of 1942, Eisenhower was promoted to Major General. Number 4, in June of 1942, he was named overall commander of all U.S. forces in the European theater of World War II. Okay, number 4, in June of 1942, he was named commanding general of all U.S. forces in the European theater of World War II. Every soldier in Europe reported or were under his direct command. Okay, that was in June of 1942. Eisenhower is named commanding general of all U.S. forces in the European theater of World War II. Number 5, in 1943, he begins his mastermind of Operation Overlord, which was what? Come on, D-Day. Okay? So in 1943, Eisenhower begins his mastermind of Operation Overlord, which was the invasion of France at Normandy on June 6, 1944. What happens to him in December of 1944, the 6th thing? He gets promoted to what?
President.
No.
5-star.
5-star general.
December of what?
December of 44, he's promoted to 5-star general. He and MacArthur are what? The last 2 5-star generals in American history, have not had one since.
How do you get to be that?
That was not 5. 4, I think. Yeah. What's that?
How do you get that?
You got to. It's like the great. It's the. You're one step below the president, basically. That's it. Although MacArthur thought he was one step above.
Would that be a 7-star?
And finally, in 1948, what did Eisenhower do to end his military career? He retired.
Oh.
So in 1948, he retired from active military duty. So he had a good career starting in 1933 all the way through. So, what's he do after he retires? What would you think he might do? He gets another job. What is that job?
President.
Ask,
History teacher.
well, that's all it is. Ask Chantel Barr and ask Paris Keynes.
Columbia.
He becomes president of Columbia University in New York. Oh, I wish I had my phone would call and ask him to know that. Oh, I might do that. Remind me. After his retirement from the military, Eisenhower becomes president of Columbia University in New York City. And he's kind of busy, but he's got some time.
You wrote a book.
So he writes a book.
Crusades in Europe.
And the book is called Crusade in Europe.
I don't know.
First edition, first printing right here, folks. Crusade in Europe.
Is that about his time?
That's it, yep.
Overall.
Yep. During the time he served as president of Columbia University, he writes a book of his memoirs called Crusade in Europe. Every president writes their memoirs, don't they, when they're done?
Is you think Donald Trump's going to write his?
He will, because they're good sellers. They make good money. Now, let's just make a little point here. Prior to this presidential election of 1952, Eisenhower wasn't quick to commit himself to do so. Wasn't sure he wanted to be president or run for president. Didn't commit himself right away. And did you know that when he was asked to run, he wasn't tied to either political party? He didn't consider himself a Democrat or a Republican. He just was kind of an independent. So he was not, he didn't even belong to any specific political party when they came and approached him about running for president. Let me show you how dignity, now think about this, and I wish I'd looked it up, and I may here before we're done. Just to show a little bit about his dignity and honor. He was offered $40,000 from McCall's magazine, which was kind of a famous magazine at the time, just to state in their magazine that he was a Republican. All he had to do is say in their magazine when they interviewed him, hey, I'm a Republican, and they would have given him $40,000. Now, we got time here. Let's see what $40,000 would be today, because I just happen to have this at my disposal. So let's see what 40,000 would be today, okay? So I got my little inflation calculator here, and I'm going to slip in there 40,000 in 19, what are we talking about here? 19 what? 1952. That would be worth today $381,000. So he was offered basically $381,000 in today's money just to say in the interview in McCall's magazine that he was a Republican. He would be.
How do you spell that nice?
McCall, M small c capital C-A-L-L apostrophe S, McCall's magazine. It's called McCall's. Well, he wasn't sure he wanted to run for president, but after some thought, this is the quote he made, you don't really have to write it down, just listen to it. He said, perhaps a soldier's duty might include service in the White House. So that's what he thought. He said, you know, people want me to serve my country in Europe during the European theater of World War II. I was happy to do that as a soldier. Perhaps a soldier's duty might include service in the White House. So he decided not. Well, we know that he went on to be nominated by the Republican Party, and you know he was elected in 1952. I'll just give you a precursor here. He's also going to be re-elected in 1956 easily. And we mentioned this, I think, before. After serving 2 terms, he becomes the first person in American history whose term of office was